Hi, I'm André Ferraz, and in this HelpNet security video, I'll be talking about the impact of location-based fraud. So, location-based fraud is more prevalent than you imagine when it comes to fraud in general, right? And it impacts different industries in many different ways. The most basic concept I want to share today is that fraudsters, they simply want to hide, right? They don't want to reveal their physical location um, because they could be caught, right? They could be identified while they are performing these fraudulent activities, right? So they want to hide their location. Therefore, they spoof location signals so they cannot be found, right? So location-based fraud is actually one of the root causes of many types of online fraud. And we're going to start by sharing some examples here with you. So the first example I have to share is around fraud farms, right? And the definition for a fraud farm is basically a physical location in which there is a significant amount of fraudulent activity going on, right? So a fraud farm could have only one people operating from there, could have a team of individuals that are working for the same organization, the same criminal organization, right? And you can even have device farms, right? So you can have a single location with multiple devices that are all like running automated or semi-automated scripts, for example, to commit fraud, right? So basically, it's a physical location in which there is fraudulent activity happening at scale, right? And this fraudulent activity can target different industries for different use cases. So, for example, one of the use cases here could be for a fraud farm to be used to open multiple accounts on a bank or multiple banks, right? So, why would this be valuable for a fraudster? Well, because if they're able to bypass the identity verification process of that particular bank, right, they would be able to have multiple banks that could be later used for different purposes. It could be used for money laundering, for example. If it could be used to gain credit, right, and ask for a loan and take the money. So there are different ways in which we can monetize these fraudulent bank accounts, as an example, right? But this could be also used to create accounts on other types of online services, right? You can create accounts on food delivery services, e-commerce services, because they might have some incentive programs for new customers. So these new accounts could be used actually for promotional abuse, right? So people would use these coupons or vouchers multiple times and eat for free or buy products at a very, very large discount. So anyways, there are multiple reasons why someone would like to open multiple accounts in a certain website or mobile application, right? The other thing that also happens frequently at these physical locations, the fraud farms, are large-scale account takeover fraud, right? So that means that there is an operation to take over accounts on multiple websites or apps. And the same examples apply, right? These accounts, different types of accounts have different types of value, but this operation could be targeted at the financial services industry, and these fraud farms could be targeted to take over accounts that have a balance, right? So once you take over that account, you can transfer those funds and you can make some money. So those are some of the examples of what could happen at a fraud farm. So again, most online applications don't have visibility about this because they are not able to collect the true location of the device that is being part of it, right? Because there is location spoofing going on. So the fraudster will be seen in different locations while they're actually, like, all of those devices, for example, or all of those accounts are being accessed or created from the same location, right? So being able to detect location spoofing uh, will enable you to identify those fraud farms and actually block that physical location, so that you make the fraudulent activity more expensive, right? The operation for a fraudster will become more complex because they will need to be switching places. They would need to be moving. So you're basically adding complexity to their operation. So fraud farms is the first example here, which is a result of location-based fraud, right? If the fraudster is able to spoof their location data, they're able to run multiple instances of devices and apps and websites from the same place and scale up their fraudulent activity. The second example here, which is actually related to fraud farms, are the bot farms, right? So you can run multiple devices at the same time from the same location, and those devices are used for different purposes, right? In many cases, a bot farm would be used to spread disinformation campaigns on social media, for example, right? So if you have access to multiple devices and you're spoofing a location, it will be hard for that social media company to connect all of those devices to the same individual or to the same location. So location spoofing, again, is a critical functionality here for the fraudster to be able to run this type of operation. Third example here related to location-based fraud is related to the food delivery and also ride-hailing businesses, in which we have cases of fake rides, right? So, for example, let's say I'm a driver on a ride-hailing app, and in the region I live, there is not much traffic. There's not much demand for these services. So if I want to get more orders or more rides, I would spoof my GPS information to say that I'm at a location in which there's a lot of demand, for example, close to an airport, right? And what happens is that if I start accepting those rides near the airport, but I don't show up, the rider is not going to see me, right? And the rider would not be able to start the ride. And there is a timeout for these rides. And if the rider is not able to find me and the timeout expires, that means that I make some money, right? So as a driver on this ride-hailing app, there's actually an incentive for me to like stay home, spoof GPS information, start accepting these rides, never leave my place, and still make some money, right? So that is some of the examples that happen. Same applies to the food delivery industry. Like fraudulent drivers would spoof their GPS information so that they would show that their route was longer than it really was, so they make more money as well, right? So these are two examples from different industries, from the logistics industry, in which location-based fraud also has an impact. Usually, when this type of behavior is identified, these platforms are going to block these drivers. The problem is that, going back to the first example, if the fraudster has the ability to spoof location information, they will be able to possibly create new accounts using other credentials, right? Fake credentials or stolen information from someone else. And they'll be able to create a new account and start doing that type of fraud over and over, right? Third example is from the gaming industry, which is collusion. So let's imagine you're playing poker online, and you have 5 people on a poker table. If 3 or 4 of these 5 are actually playing together, they can game the system, right? They can manipulate that game in their favor. And that's where location spoofing comes in, because these 3 or 4 people that are playing on that 5 people game, they would spoof location information to show that they are in different locations while they're actually at the same place, right? So identifying location spoofing is a way to identify this type of collusion within gaming. platforms, and in that way you can protect users from this type of fraud. Still in gaming, there's also another thing, which is the jurisdictional compliance. So for certain types of games or things like sports betting, for example, you have different regulations in different states. So for example, in the state of California, you cannot play certain games, but if you cross the border and you go to Nevada, you can play these games, right? So how do you control this? You usually use location information to decide if you will allow that user to play the game or not, right? But the thing is that it's hard to do that because it's easy for the end user to spoof location information. So being able to detect location spoofing is also a way to ensure that you are compliant with the local regulations in that space. And it goes on and on, right? And the travel and industry, for example, the marketplaces for lodging, they face issues with fake listings, for example, and fake reviews. Location spoofing is part of that process as well. So you could list a place as if you were there, but you're not, right? And that could be a fake place. So if the person gets there to that location, they would find that there's no home for them to stay at. This actually happened to me once. It was a really frustrating experience because I got to a place that didn't really exist, and I was supposed to sleep there that night. So it was awful. Same applies to reviews for places, right? If you go to a restaurant and you take a look on Google Maps, there might be some fake reviews, right? And location spoofing could be part of that. So again, there are multiple industries that are affected by this, but in general, the first example I gave, which are the fraud farms, are the big thing here, because if the fraudster is able to scale up their activities from a single location, they can do massive things, right? So they can open multiple accounts, they can take over multiple accounts. If they're using location spoofing very well, it will be harder for these institutions to link all of these accounts to the same person in the same location, right? So what causes this, right? What is the cause of location-based fraud? Basically, the main thing here is that most of the fraud prevention and authentication solutions, they leverage the location data that is available to them, that is made available by the browser or the operating system, which is usually IP or GPS data. The problem is it's very easy to spoof this type of information. And that's why location data is not really used as it should for security purposes. So for example, IP-based geolocation can be spoofed using VPNs, proxies, Tor, exit nodes, and many other tools, right? You can do tunneling and many other things. So in addition, more recently, many browsers like Safari, for example, have started to randomize IP addresses, rendering these IP addresses useless for security purposes. So that's IP. When it comes to GPS, it can also be spoofed in many different ways. And it's important to understand that both operating systems, Android and iOS, have created features for developers that enable them to test their apps as if they were in different locations, right? This was made on purpose to enable developers to test their apps as if they were in different places. And that actually has opened a vulnerability that is being exploited by the fraudsters. So besides fake GPS applications which exploit this specific thing, there are other tools like tampering tools, instrumentation tools, and many others to spoof GPS information. So it is very easy to spoof GPS as well. So main thing you need to do if you want to detect fraud farms and if you want to address location-based fraud is to implement location spoofing detection to your application. Otherwise, you cannot use this data for this purpose. So strong recommendation here, take a look at location spoofing detection techniques so that you can use location data to identify location-based fraud and all of these other types of fraud that I have mentioned. Thank you very much.